Good morning, everyone. To those of you joining us online and those of you here in the room, welcome to today's event, the EU Fertiliser Action Plan, ETS, CBAM, and the fertilizer industry. My name is Dave Keating. I'm a journalist based here in Brussels. I'll be walking us through today's discussions, which come at a very pivotal moment, as I think you all know. So today we're going to be talking about the various EU policies that are impacting the European fertilizer sector, most notably, of course, the newly unveiled Fertiliser Action Plan from the European Commission, which I'm sure everyone in this room has been following very closely. The action plan aims to address a complex policy triangle, ensuring affordability for farmers, strengthening Europe's strategic autonomy, and ensuring that European fertilizer producers are fit to transition to low-carbon fertilizer production. As we'll hear today, this is one of Europe's relatively hard-to-abate sectors, and it's one that has a critical importance to Europe's agriculture and food supply. So it's not something you want to get wrong. We'll have two panels today, one looking specifically at the action plan, and the second looking at the EU emissions trading system and the carbon border adjustment mechanism, CBAM, and how all those two policies are impacting the fertilizer sector. To get us started, I'll turn over the podium for our keynote address from EU Commissioner for Agriculture and Food, Christoph Hansen.
Yes, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and first of all I have to say that I'm delighted to welcome you all to open this important event. Oil and steel often make the headlines, but ammonia and urea a little bit less, I would say, but they are equally important. Fertilizers are the backbone of our food production. Think about the cereals you had for breakfast this morning or the delicious steak you had for dinner yesterday evening. They are always behind nutrients that make the crops grow for food and for feed. And also I think you remember on the 18th of December we had the farmers here on just next to the Berlaymont building, and one of their main requests back then was already the fertilizer prices, but this has of course increased due to the crisis in the Middle East. And today I would like to start by outlining the main challenges we face when it comes to fertilizers. First of course, the prices. This is a very simple reality. Fertilizer prices depend largely on energy prices, and after the energy crisis in 2022, prices never returned to pre-COVID levels. And today fertilizers cost around 70% more than they did in 2024, and already in 2024 the fertilizer prices had increased by 60% from 2020 on, and they were already too expensive in 2024. And second, our European production of fertilizers is declining. Today we import around 40 to 45% of our fertilizers, and our dependency there of course stand as well for our vulnerabilities. And in other words, we remain highly dependent on external suppliers for essential components of our food production and our food security. And this is not just an agriculture issue, it What information do we have on prices or stocks? How is our internal market functioning? What about innovations and new technologies? And we started this reflection back in 2022, but we needed, of course, to take it to the next level. And on the 19th of May, I presented the Fertiliser Action Plan. And it is built around three fundamental objectives. First, supporting farmers with a significant financial support package and also providing further flexibilities for member states to direct CAP funds to affected farmers. And second, promoting the sustainable use of recycled nutrients, bio-based and low-carbon fertilizers. Third, reducing strategic dependencies and strengthening policy coordination at European and international level. And let us start with the first challenge, affordability and accessibility. Our first priority is to get support quickly to affected farmers, and this is why we start delivering on the actions announced in the Fertiliser Action Plan. And on Friday, we will present our legislative proposals to allow CAP advance payments and enable member states to give farmers unused CAP funds so they can buy fertilizers. And we will also confirm the amount of our financial support package. And I count on the co-legislators to adopt our proposals in a matter of urgency so that the support can be delivered to the farmers on the ground at the right moment. And at the same time, we must reduce farmers' exposure to future crises. And we will explore the wider use of digestates with the necessary environmental safeguards. Indeed, biogas and biomethane do not only mean energy. They also mean homegrown fertilizers in the form of digestates, and preparatory work is already underway, and we are doing our utmost to speed up all producers to this end. And these measures should already provide some relief. But let me be very clear, we cannot spend the next decade moving from one fertilizer crisis to another. I would start with partnership. Fertilizer producers and farmers need to talk to each other more often, and we will support this dialogue. We will also examine how to improve the uptake of bio-based and low-carbon fertilizers, and for that we need to look at our existing legislative framework beyond agriculture. And we need to consider labeling schemes and minimum blending requirements that combine conventional and bio-based fertilizer products. Investments in innovation and scale-up are essential in bringing to the market new solutions to capture nutrients and to lower the carbon footprint. And we will work on the single market, assess as well stockpiling, and if necessary, consider additional trade measures. And we need better transparency across the value chain, update and reliable information on production volumes and production capacity, sales prices and stocks. And we will strengthen the fertilizers market observatory and improve the market monitoring. And we will support farmers in nutrient management and precision fertilizing, advice and knowledge transfer being key in this respect. We also need to look at the possibilities offered by new technologies, such as drones, that can help to reduce the fertilizer needs without compromising our yields. And I also want to raise the topic of the upcoming ETS review. It is as well about the topics you will address today. There is, of course, a central question I hope you will address here today. How can we sustain European industry and farmers alike? Shouldn't support and flexibility for industry go hand in hand with the responsibility to deliver more homegrown and circular solutions? Circular solutions can make farmers part of the business case and lower dangerous dependencies at the very same time. Without prejudging the upcoming review, we will examine whether we can strengthen nutrient recycling and circular fertilizers by combining tools such as the CAP, carbon credits and ETS revenues. And this is a win-win approach for farmers and for the industry. In conclusion, we are at the crossroads. Change will take time, but we need as well to act now. Now is the time to choose our food security, strategic autonomy and competitiveness. And today and for the future, I believe that Europe is up to this challenge. And to be successful, we need to ensure that this brings positive change for our farmers, producers, consumers, and our society. And we need to do this in a concerted way, based in dialogue and transparency at all levels across all policies. And there can be no food security without fertilizer security. And that being said, I wish you a very good event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for getting us started with that keynote. Now, as the Commissioner noted, we'll be talking about ETS and CBAM in the second panel today, and indeed, we'll be addressing this question of how circularity can actually help farmers, help Europe's security and strategic autonomy, and also help the climate. But first, we're going to have our first panel, which is on the Fertiliser Action Plan, which we've just heard preview. We've just heard the contours of that action plan, and now this panel is going to unpack how these objectives interact in practice. So we'll discuss the short-term measures that are in the action plan, including support for farmers and enhanced collaboration across the value chain, as well as the long-term goals of enabling conditions to maintain and strengthen domestic production capacity, improve access to competitively priced energy and raw materials, and reinforce resilience against global market shocks. And in particular, we'll talk about the feasibility of scaling low-carbon and circular fertilizers, including, possibly, through labeling or creating market incentives. So let me introduce you now to the panelists who can come up and take their seats now. We have with us here today Fabian Santini, who is head of units for working on the governance of the agri-food markets at the European Commission. We have Eli Tsifuru, who is the Secretary General of the Farming Industry Association, COPA-COGECA. And we have Tiffany Stefani, who is Vice President for European Government Relations and External Communications at the Norwegian fertilizer and chemical company, Yara International. Thank you all so much for joining us today. You guys in the audience will have the opportunity to ask your questions to the panel via Slido. I think we have the QR code that you can scan there. You can put in your questions at any time, and I'll see them here on the tablet. You can also ask your questions live in person. I'll also check at the end if we have any questions live and in person. But you can also, if you know already what your question is, you can put it in now using that QR code. Okay, Fabian, let's start with a question for you. So we've heard some of the main points of the Fertiliser Action Plan there. Maybe you can go into a bit more detail. What does the Commission hope to achieve with this action plan?
Thanks, Dave. It's a bit awkward position for me to speak just after my commissioner, so I may repeat a little bit what he is doing, but you are learning by repeating very often, so that's a good opportunity for me. So, as the commissioner said, we face for the second time in less than 5 years a price hike in fertilizer, and nothing new. We are strongly dependent. The commissioner said it. A bit less for potash. But for phosphorus and nitrogen, we are dependent. Nitrogen because we're dependent on natural gas, not on nitrogen. It's everywhere, and therefore we are connected to energy market. So, in 2022, we presented a communication. Now, as the commissioner rightly said it, we take it to the next step, an action plan. Because we have to be realistic, this is a huge challenge to ensure affordability and availability of fertilizer. While the industry remains competitive, the farming sector remains competitive. The commissioner spoke about possible impact on the food prices. I would add that this comes at a moment where decarbonization policies are starting to enter into force. So that's an extra challenge compared to 2022. So that's a situation that is complex. Of course, what we first want to see with this plan is look at the short term. The commissioner very clearly announced that on Friday we'll come with a CAP package and announce the final figure of the support, the exceptional support envisaged in terms from the agricultural reserve. So 2 of the actions on the short term, helping farmers to have the means to purchase the fertilizers they need for the next harvest, the next cycle. We all know that the next cycle that is concerning for everybody, 2026, 2027. So here is the delivery of the promise. That's one thing. This comes on top of things that we've already done. It's listed in the plan also. The temporary stated framework, METSAF, the adjustment of the CBAM mechanism with this markup of 1%, the suspension of duties for nitrogen and nitrogen fertilizer. We also, in fact, this is the short term. That's the first delivery we intend. The second delivery we intend is continue the reflection on this medium to long term transition and addressing this, in fact, quadruple challenge: competitiveness on the industry, competitiveness of farmers, decarbonation, and strategic autonomy. That's 4 challenges. Usually you speak of win-win or win-win-win. Here we need to win-win-win-win. So that's probably the big challenge. So we need to mobilize all the alternatives. Biomass, recycling, the Commissioner said it. That are deriving from the ETS and CBAM universe of these tools that need to be, and to which the EU fertilizer industry needs an improved access. That's something that we are thinking is very important. And from the side of the farmers, we need to accompany the farmers in getting a better nutrient use efficiency, reinforce their use of plant proteins to be able to face, to not only rely on a change, on an alternative products put on the market by the industry and that they can afford to buy, we also need them to be able to afford, but also reduce their dependency on fertilizer. Because this is super complex, win-win-win-win. Just invented it now, so it's not on my LTT speakings. Because this is complex, we insist on the collaborative approach, the partnership. Again, the Commissioner insinuated it. We will need everybody as collective intelligence to find the right and nuanced and balanced solutions, policy solutions, to these very complex, imbricated challenges. And for this, we will launch a EU fertilizer value chain partnership with the stakeholders from fertilizer industry to farmers and others. Whoever is needed, whoever can contribute will be invited to this partnership. But also member states, because as the Commissioner also said it, the single market of fertilizer is another thing that we need to progress on, and that's why member states will be important in this. I will just insist on one thing. To have a partnership, we need trust. A partnership that delivers, we need trust, and to have trust, we need to have a good evidence and information base shared, and that's why for us transparency, without entering into the territory of competition and trade secrets, but transparency is needed, and we will also insist on that.
Yeah, and indeed that dialogue between the Commission and the sector is really key, and as was identified in the action plan. So we have representatives of both farmers and fertilizers here on the panel. So I want to get your thoughts on the action plan. Ellie, let's start with you. What is Copa Cogeca's response to the action plan?
First of all, I would like to thank Fertilizers Europe, my good colleague Antoine Oxa, for the invitation, and Euractiv for organizing this very timely event. Allow me to start by giving you a bit of a taste of what is happening right now on the ground. It is undeniable that we are currently, as a sector, as a farming sector, are facing a very severe input crisis, with fertilizers at the forefront. So it's not only about fertilizers, but fertilizers, let's say, it's the biggest stake in this significant crisis. This happens in a context where EU crop markets are already under significant pressure and stress, with farmers operating in razor thin, if non-existent margins. So we have in cereals member states where the cereal sector is on the red for a fourth consecutive year. So this is the context. The current geopolitical and trade tensions, and I'm referring mostly to the Middle East, is only exacerbating an inherent truth when it comes to the sector, which is its major vulnerability by definition and exposure. So farmers bear all these pressures, and additionally, and this started from the beginning of the year, and I know this is not the topic of this panel, but I need to mention it, we are bearing a significant cost for the implementation of CBAM. And this comes on top of that, of the situation that I have described. So Fabian said it very well. We have secured the current planting season, but as we enter to autumn and year 2027, and with the Middle East crisis that doesn't seem to be solved quickly, we are entering a zone of great uncertainty. The Fertilizers Action Plan has been a long-standing request of the farmers. It is necessary, it is welcome, but what we need to do now is, first of all, to look to the immediate criticalities. Fabian mentioned it as well. So we need to secure farm viability and that the production continues across the EU in the coming months and looking to 2027. So it's not only about now. We are talking about a longer period where the criticality of whether we will have the production going forward is a key question. And to let you know a bit what our members are reporting is that we already have, and we will be able to provide more input, concrete input at a later stage because it's still too early. They are already either applying minimizing fertilizer strategies, or they shift rotations, or they even go to set aside. So what will happen as we go forward at the end of the year and in 2027? So we need to have this in place, the measures and the support for farmers. And it's not only Copa Cogeca. I mean, if you listen to analysts, they all say, the FAO said for European farmers, if we go beyond the 3-month window and the Middle East crisis continues, then support will be fundamental. Then we need also to look into the medium and longer term, of course, because it is a strategy. And looking to the medium and longer term, of course, there are a lot that we can do. I hear to what the Commissioner and Fabian just said about the organic fertilizers, biofertilizers, and how the sector can deliver to them. But to deliver, we need now to have the regulatory barriers removed now. And I'm referring to the nitrates directive, because we can say that manure, renure, and even renure, we know very well that there we have criteria that restrict the production of renure, and these also need to be removed. And this needs to be done now if we want to see the deployment of solutions in the coming years, because the organic and biofertilizers will not provide the security that we need now. It is for the medium and longer term, and we need to be aware. So one criticality is that we shouldn't fall into the trap of the transition gap. So until we get to a point where what the objectives of the Fertilizers Action Plan is, which is affordability, availability, and a strong industry and competitive farmers, we need to secure that in this direction and in this transition, we can continue having food production and food security in the EU. So this is fundamental. And we feel, even though we welcome the action plan, we feel that this is not secure because we don't have the guarantee of the removal of the regulatory barriers. The support that, okay, we will wait to see what the Commission is going to announce later this week. If we estimate what the costs are right now and the criticalities and the dramatic situation on the ground, I can guess that it will not be enough. It will not be enough. And we know that DG Agri is doing the maximum of effort, but it's not enough. To give you only a figure, only the impact of the CBAM we tried to assess in COPA and COGECA with our capacity, only the impact of the CBAM for 2026, it means 800 million. Only the impact of the CBAM, leaving the rest out. So this is a bit in a nutshell our view. When it comes to the cooperation and the partnership, of course we are here, we talk also as sectors independently of the Commission. We are in dialogue despite the criticalities that we have. What we need from the Commission is, and I'm happy that Fabian mentioned it, is not only to make sure that this dialogue is done also at an institutional level. We need to have facts and data. We need to know prices, sales, stocks, the cost of decarbonization as well, what it means, who pays it. So if we are to have this dialogue should be on the basis of concrete data, because we can talk also to each other, but we need the technical capacity of the Commission to provide at very regular pace these elements that are fundamental for us to be able to have a fact-based discussion and to see what are the solutions.
Yeah, as you note, it's not just fertilizers that are causing difficulty for farmers right now. There is a general input crisis caused by the Iran war and other factors. And fertilizer is a big part of it, but farmers are really struggling at the moment. Tiffany, let's turn to you next. For a company like Yara, what are the implications of the action plan?
I'd like to start with a step back and bring up more of a personal comment. I've been for roughly 20 years, like you, Ellie, in the European policy bubble, 10 years in the fertilizer sector, and actually what we're seeing now is quite a milestone. Because as much as Ellie explained that farmers have been calling for an action plan for our sector, we did the same. So finally seeing that the Commission has been listening to the requests of the value chain players and is delivering, that's, as I said, quite a milestone. Then in terms of the concrete implications, I think it also shows that the fertilizer sector is not just an industry, it's a strategic sector. And that's an important acknowledgement. This also means that the Commission is not just regulating it. The Commission is also influencing how the value chain will evolve. Then if we look into the elements of the action plan, I think also colleagues from Fertilizers Europe will agree with me that the direction set in the action plan is the right one. Whether we talk about boosting nutrient efficiency, low carbon fertilizers, recycled nutrients, these are needed indications that this is the right way to go for our industry to continue to diversify and meet better the needs and the demands of farmers. The challenge is quite significant for you, Fabien, and of course with the Commission, because you had to face kind of a dual issue, which is Ellie, you have been underlining very legitimately the growing concerns and the difficulties for farmers on the ground. And as an industry, also Commissioner Hansen repeated earlier, since 2022, we never came back to the energy prices that we used to see in our sector. And considering that natural gas is 80% of the production cost, this makes a very different picture. Now, as Yara, but I think it's the same for the whole industry, what matters for us is not just the headline, it's the execution. So I think I will align with you, Ellie, on this one, that we are really keen to see how the plan will be executed. We are keen as an industry to also support in providing more transparency and also contributing to the partnership in order to maintain this trust that is essential, because farmers and fertilizer industries are interdependent.
Thanks. So, Fabian, Ellie mentioned this 3-month window. So if we go beyond this 3-month window with the prices, then support will be needed. In the action plan, there are short-term measures outlined, as well as this more long-term strategy. And some of those include support for farmers and enhanced collaboration across the value chain. Will that be enough to support farmers, particularly if we exceed this 3-month window?
Well, first, it's been more than 3 months, and the conflict in the Middle East started. So you have a set of different scenarios that are tested by many people everywhere, and we know that the longer it goes, the worse will be the impact. But we have to make assumption on what will it mean for the campaign price for fertilizer, and so you have an estimate that you mentioned. There are others that are circulating. What we want to be sure is that we signal now that after more than 3 months, it's time to deliver short-term relief. Will, frankly speaking, a quite unprecedented setting. You have METSAF, temporary state aid framework, specifically identifying farmers as a beneficiary for fertilizer and diesel. And we have received already 3 notifications, well, notifications from 3 member states, but so that's getting into traction. The CAP legislative package that will be published on Friday, that will clearly say you can that will facilitate advance payments from the upcoming payments. That is allowing member states to reshuffle and reprogram their unused funds in these late moments of the previous financial period. Of course, this will not have the same effect in every member state. We know that, but at least it's one more leverage. Plus, a rather significant amount, as was said, I think in EP plenary, it's 200 million and at least double. That's I cannot disclose the figure. The figure will be disclosed on Friday, but that's not a ridiculous amount. Far from that, knowing that in these kind of measures, we usually allow member states to top up without going through the state aid rules. So, will it be enough? I mean, support is never enough to fully offset the impact of economic shocks in the world. Because if we completely offset it, we just isolate ourselves and from the life of markets, and that's not possible. So, if the question is, will it exactly compensate 100% of the extra cost? I guess it will not. Yeah, but it will be a real help for farmers to mitigate the shock. So in this sense, it is really ambitious. I mean, I'm also, like Ellie and Tiffany, been a long time around in these areas. And this one is a really decisive support package for the short term.
I want to switch to the long-term measures now, and particularly the long-term measures to spur the development of low-carbon fertilizers. Let's start, Tiffany, let me start with you on this. In terms of, so one of the ideas in the action plan is this development of lead markets in order to sufficiently drive demand for low-carbon fertilizers. Do you feel that the action plan has set out a good pathway to develop that? Can affordability and decarbonization go hand in hand? And what are some of the barriers that are going to make it difficult to decarbonize the fertilizer sector?
I think we can ensure affordability and decarbonization together, but not by default. There needs to be a strong political will to make it work. And I'd like to do a reality check, as much as you've been doing, Ellie, as well. If we look at the challenge to decarbonize the production of fertilizers, and especially ammonia, we are now touching the hardest part of the decarbonization. It's the hard to abate. So the investments are massive. The transformation we're talking about is huge industrial scale. We're talking about decades investments. As I said earlier, energy is the main input cost for fertilizer production. And even if we decarbonize and go for carbon capture and storage or with renewable hydrogen, energy will remain the main cost factor. That's the first element. The second element is that when we look also into the numbers a bit more closer, renewable energy is on average more expensive than natural gas. So the finish line or the direction, which is to decarbonize via renewable hydrogen, will not cost less, it will cost more. And this is an element that needs to be considered and solved. Unless it is solved, we would be in a situation where, as an industry, we would have no other choice than decarbonizing because ETS, because Fit for 55, but then the costs would be borne by farmers. And it cannot happen that the whole climate transition is being kind of carried by the shoulders of the farmers alone. And this is where I think the action plan is setting the direction, but we clearly need to have more political ambition on the question that you underlined, Ellie, earlier on, who pays? And as long as we are, if I may say so, dancing around that question, we will not be able to deliver on affordability and decarbonization at the same time. One way, of course, to do it is to look at the whole value chain approach. And that's something we've been calling for as fertilizer industry for quite some time. There are similar conversations currently going on in the Critical Chemicals Alliance exactly on the same topic. It is important to make sure that the whole value chain follows these decarbonization incentives. And for that, we need lead markets, we need incentives at farmer level, we also need support from regulatory framework, whether it's the Biotech Act 2 or what will come out from the Critical Chemicals Alliance. But we need to have many pieces added to this puzzle to make it work. Because otherwise, if we don't solve this question of the cost transfer, we can be in the same room in 2 years and we will be wondering why low carbon fertilizers are not being taken up by farmers. So it's really about making sure that we end up in a framework where farmers are supported for the access to low carbon fertilizers. Our industry having sufficient support also to invest, because the investments are massive, so we're talking CapEx, but also OpEx support, and also making sure that the whole value chain goes with it. Whether it's then something to also go up to the level of consumers and having a label on the carbon footprint, we can discuss. But we need to have the whole value chain moving forward. And this is hopefully something that will be discussed also in the upcoming partnership.
Yeah, Ellie, Tiffany mentions who's going to pay, that the costs, if there was kind of forced decarbonization, the costs would be borne by farmers. What is going to make it appealing commercially for farmers to buy low carbon fertilizer? What's the pathway to get there?
First of all, allow me to say that, I mean, what Tiffany said, the energy question is fundamental. If we don't solve the energy dimension of the problem, I mean, we will not make it. We will not make it. I said it before, for the moment, we bear an unbearable cost for the decarbonization policies of the EU. And I'm referring again to CBAM. We are paying the cost, and it is heavy right now. When it comes to lead markets and to low carbon fertilizers, I have two things to say. First of all, for farmers, things are very simple. If they are to adopt a solution, a low carbon solution, they need to be certain that it's going to work on their field, that it's going to ensure the agronomic efficiency, the yields. It has to be 100% equivalent with the solutions that they apply now, the mineral solutions. So otherwise it will not work. And the second dimension, and we need to be very attentive to this, we cannot force farmers to go towards the direction. We cannot force the market. So if this lead market discussion is to impose that farmers go towards this direction and buy these products, I mean, we are heading to the wrong direction. So we need to be very careful. So for farmers, efficiency and price, and it's very simple, it's the basic precondition to go towards these solutions.
If I can just jump in, I 100% agree with you on the voluntary nature. That's the only way it can work, because if we go more for the stick than the carrot, then the transition will fail. And then on the agronomic efficacy, when we talk about low carbon fertilizers, the way ammonia, which is the main building block of nitrogen fertilizers, the way ammonia is produced changes, but the end product doesn't change. So it's simply the same efficacy for farm level. So this is completely ensured. Then I think we have also to have additional regulatory elements to be enabled, whether it's in the fertilizing product regulation or other pieces of legislation to ensure certification, to ensure clear labeling, to ensure also third-party verification so that the claims that are related to these products can be trusted by the whole value chain. Because what we need to do is to also connect it. Our fertilizer production, and when it's used by farmers in the field, this is the Scope 3 emission of all the food chain players. So they have a vested interest to see improvements there, and we also need to have them at the table.
Fabien, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, no, first to reassure Ellie, when the expression lead market, there is the word market. So we are still in the market economy, and that must be clear. The whole issue with this lead market is for us to have a demand pool, in fact, and a demand pool not forced. That's really there is an interest into getting this demand starting, and that means that if it's starting, normally it suscitates. It helps the industry to invest, to get scale economies, to improve. We know there are a lot of areas where it's less easy than in others, but if we don't start, we'll never, and we'll be like you said, Tiffany, in 2 years we'll be in the same room speaking of the same thing. The change is the partnership. We're not going to wait 2 years before discussing. We're going to do that more regularly, and we're going to really try to be in the same room together to have the right policy mix and piloting of all this, not waiting for the next crisis, probably not in 2 years, a bit more, 2022, 2026, 4 years. But there will be another one. So let's not wait for this next one, and let's work together. And yeah,
go ahead.
No, that's okay. I'll keep. I have a few elements also, but I will.
Well, yeah,
I keep them for the other questions.
Well, I wanted to follow up exactly on this. In terms of getting this balance between competitiveness, strategic autonomy, and also these long-term goals of decarbonization, how can, and this is very much what the action plan is focused on, how can we get that balance, right, where one isn't hurting the other?
But that's precisely where we need the balance, and it's because you have trade-offs, and more trade-offs than synergies in all this, that you need to really find the exact difficulty. I mean, who was talking about the transition gap? I mean, it's always the same problem. We know where we want to go, and there's a transition to go there, and that's where we have to navigate closely, and that's where the partnership can play a real role on that. And now, if I allow me, I hinted at it when I said that the partnership will include the industry, the farmers, and whoever else is interested. And clearly, this and pilot it, and that's not an easy task. But again, if we don't start to discuss this, if we don't have data, we'll be like Tiffany says. In 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we'll meet in the same room, saying the same thing, and that is what we do not want to repeat.
So we've had tons of questions come in via Slido from the audience. We'll only have time to get to a couple of them, but plenty for you all to talk about during the coffee break. First question. Fabien, it'll be for you. It's from Aviv Bartal. Is there any, he says hello, is there any specific urgent support to producers of fertilizers that face high gas prices and very high carbon prices? Or is urgent aid reserved only for farmers?
Well, the package DG Agri is prepared for the Commission in the Fertiliser Action Plan is clearly for farmers, that's clear. But it doesn't mean there is nothing for the fertilizer industry in other policies. And there is the Accelerate EU communication that was published in April, which allows member states to consider support to energy-intensive industries in the face of what is happening. So again, let's not mix the two different policies. I get your point. Energy is a crucial point, but energy is a common challenge of all the economic activities in Europe. So let's not mix everything. There will not be a specific energy policy for the fertilizer, or even for the farmers. So there is an energy policy where we can have interesting things. So there is an energy policy that is addressing the needs of energy-intensive industries and through the Accelerate EU framework. There is another point in the Fertiliser Action Plan which is clear, is that we hear from the fertilizer industry that they find it difficult to have access to all the financial tools that are deriving from ETS, CBAM, Innovation Fund, and other tools, the future, the distribution of ETS revenues and things like this. We will reflect on why is this the case, and how can we favor that in this competitive an open process of allocating these funds. How can we improve the access of the fertilizer industry? And that probably we'll have to sit down together on this and reflect on the projects that are being funded by the Innovation Fund in the last years and which one were not and why. And that's probably a process where we have to continue and work and improve the system.
Fabienne, as I suspected, all of the questions are for you about the action plan.
No,
but
you have to find one or two.
Exactly.
For
Ellie and Tiffany, if you want to jump in on any of these, just give me a signal. So I have two questions here from Cayeto Hernandez Fertigui. First question, why is there not in the Fertiliser Action Plan specific objectives for import reduction and low carbon fertilizers quotas or other measures that lead us on the quadruple challenge that you mentioned, specifically decarbonization and autonomy? Second question, also from him, recognition of low carbon fertilizers in food value chains. How does the Commission envisage recognizing and rewarding the use of LCF within agricultural and food supply chains, particularly for companies with Scope 3 decarbonization commitments?
On the first point, I would say thanks for the suggestion. This is the role of the partnership to, so it's already participating to the partnership to find other ideas. That's something we can have a look. On duties, we just suspended all MFN, so it's probably the moment of the short-term reaction. Let's see for the longer term, this kind of idea of having some specific facilitated import regime for low-carbon fertilizer could be a way too. We also have to protect our own low-carbon fertilizer development. So that's something probably. And you want to react on this one before I go to the next one, yeah?
Okay. Yeah. I think it's important to also consider that strategic autonomy is not just about managing imports. It's about, as you said, Fabien, sustaining production in Europe. And there, in the context of the production of low-carbon fertilizers, we mentioned the demand aspect. There's also an aspect related to predictability and a supportive framework. And investment decisions will always go where there is a predictable framework. And that's something to consider also when we discuss the future of ETS and the future of CBAM. We need to have certainly additional indications as an industry where this is going and maintain a constructive evolution and make sure that also from this climate framework there is also part of the funds that are guided to farmers in order to support this transition.
If I may, to complement and to give a bit our dimension when it comes to trade in general. I mean, it is a fact, the Commissioner mentioned it at the beginning, he gave the figure, we are dependent. And we have the objective to arrive to a level of autonomy. I mean, autonomy is never a black and white question. It's a progress, and it is about resilience and creating less dependencies. So we are dependent on trade. as far as the farmers are concerned, we will need to keep importing and to differentiate the sources of imports. Differentiation, I mean, if you, the literature equals strategic autonomy with differentiation and not having dependencies on certain actors, either for materials, either for the inputs imported. So we have the MFN that have been lifted for 1 year. We believe that it should be as long as the crisis warrants, but we still have, and I know that the colleagues from the fertilizer industry have a different view, we still have anti-dumping in place that do not allow us to source at affordable prices for farmers until we get to a level where, and this is what we all wish, that the industry is able to support our domestic industry, what we need. So we need to cushion the pathway towards this strategic autonomy. So all the solutions need to be there, need to be in place, in our view.
I think on trade defense instruments, that's a space where we will always agree that we disagree. But I think there is something in common there, which is that whether we talk about fertilizer industry or farmers, it's about the level playing field. And fact is that as a fertilizer industry, we've been carrying a carbon cost for the last decades, whilst all imports are not carrying any. So that's one element, and the CBAM will level the playing field. And then in the case of trade defense, those measures are imposed by the Commission after very long proceedings, where also the union interest is being considered. So it's important that we also keep this tool in the toolbox in order to maintain and sustain production in Europe.
Let me just check. Let's move on to another question. Do we have any? You didn't do the second question. You're right. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, maybe just one last word on this import of low carbon, and because it's written in the Fertiliser Action Plan that we have also a potential to diversify imports from for low carbon fertilizer from other countries than the ones that are producing fossil fuels. Some can produce both, but there is a possibility also to diversify things, and that's something that our development policy can also support. And the second question was about how can the Commission thinks of recognizing low carbon fertilizer in the food chain. This is clearly going to be a discussion that we will have. We are evoking this idea of and the Commissioner said it, of labeling schemes. Then the details of it deserves a longer conversation than just a plan put on the table and a little event here. But that's clearly the kind of event, the kind of policy tools that we need to assess and check together. How can it work? How can it go just beyond the production of fertilizer, but really be reflected in Scope 3 emissions commitment, like you said, Stephanie, but not only, maybe also to the consumer somehow. This is a whole reflection that we need to have together on, and that's why in the partnership we will have to involve also downstreams operator of the food chain to go that. The Commission has no preconceived idea on how to do this, but it's really a key aspect of the discussion that will start now.
So, do we have any live question in the room that anyone wants to ask? In the back here, the microphone coming up to you. Please keep it as brief as possible so we can get to other questions.
It's always brief.
Yes, thank you very much. Max Schulman, arable farmer from Finland. You're talking a lot about the chain, at least from the Commission side, and the partnerships and all of these. Quick question, when will the partnership group start working? When will that happen? Will it happen tomorrow or next week? Because we need solutions, and the problem is that it takes some time before you will find common solutions from this type of a group. When will it be set up? Simple question.
We set up in the third quarter of the year, so not today, not next week, but the third quarter. I must admit that one of the narratives I wanted to say today is that in my opening, but I got caught by the time, is that I was hoping that this event would have this spirit of the partnership. So, and I see that it's the case. We have this spirit of partnerships. So even if it's not formally launched, Max, we already discussed.
Very specific question, very specific answer. I love it. Let's go to the next Slido question. Actually, Tiffany, I think this will be for you. It's from Bernd Haveresch. Since 2020, we have a decline of ammonia, thus also fertilizer, production and capacity in Europe. Decline was projected to continue into the 2030s. Will we now see a reversal of the trend? How much new production capacity will be realized?
That's a major question. I think I can only speak on behalf of the company I represent today. What we can clearly see is indeed that it has been a very challenging time for especially the ammonia part of our production as industry, which relates directly to the interconnection between ammonia production and use of natural gas and the energy crisis. As Yara, we had to undertake transformations. We had to close a plant in France, which was a very difficult decision, transform also the production of another plant in Belgium, exactly to be able to compensate the challenges we face, which is losing actually competitiveness because of the energy cost structure. In terms of for all the rest of our production system, as Yara last year we announced or published record production results. So we are doing our best to compensate and meet the farmers' demand. For future perspectives, you can understand that it's related to various company strategies. So it's a bit difficult to go into the details right here, right now. Clearly, when we talk about strategic autonomy, it's about sustaining production in Europe. So one way or another, we have to figure this out, not just as Yara, but across the industry. And then we can have a more one-to-one conversation with a coffee afterwards.
Fabian?
Listening to Tiffany, I wanted to say that there is another aspect that we need. I mean, we depend on natural gas, but natural gas can be replaced by biomethane. And biomethane development can be also a source of reboosting a bit. I know there are some few projects of ammonia based on biomethane that are developing. Probably they are a bit behind the green and the blue in the picture of the, but maybe they can make it a bit more, and this will also allow farmers to provide the raw materials.
Yeah,
So
I agree. Then in terms of the interconnection, it's just deepen. In Europe, we are using some renewable natural gas or biomethane when we produce low carbon fertilizers in Germany. This is still pilot. In Brazil, we do it big scale because we have more biomethane available at the right place at the right time. So the challenge we have seen when we looked into this as Yara is that there's still a lot of diversity and not the sufficient amount of energy that we need because we are producing 24/7 almost every day of the year.
Ellie, you wanted to come in?
If I may, I mean, in this partnership, we will need to ask ourselves the big questions. So, okay, energy might be an overall strategic issue for the EU as a whole, but we shouldn't shy away from it. So one thing is clear. The second thing is the ETS and the CBAM. We need to discuss. We need to discuss. Of course, the two are mirroring each other. We are currently thinking very carefully with our members and reflecting on how to go forward, but the status quo is not sustainable. I already gave you an indication of what we pay due to the EU decarbonization policies. We need to find a solution there as well. If we do not do it, the problem will still be there in a few years. These are the big issues. So the partnership is not about the small-scale solutions that will take years to become big scale and that will be impeded by the big issues that do not allow to cover the lost ground. So it needs to be part of the agenda. As farmers, we think that we should find a way to deal with it. And overall, as an EU, I mean, if you see in terms of carbon pricing systems across the world, we are all alone. We are all alone. Even if we want to implement, we have difficulty because we don't have the equivalent from our global partners. So we should ask ourselves, where are we going? So let's not shy away from the big issues. We need to sit on the table and to discuss on them as well.
We'll be talking more about that in the second panel, particularly the ETS was conceived as something that would link to global systems. Fabian, I know you wanted to come in on that, but let me also put a final question to you before we wrap up. This question is from Emilio. Why have a common action plan for Europe with 27 different local regulations versus one optional EU regulation for fertilizers, referring specifically to EU 1009-2009? So why do an action plan rather than a regulation, an updated regulation?
Okay, I'll start with this. No, I will start with reacting to what Eli said, and of course we will not shy away from the big picture, and I will not step into your next panel, Dave, promised. But I wanted to say that I wanted to mention two important points of the Fertiliser Action Plan that also aim at putting this on the table. Is first we want to have a more commonly agreed assessment of what is the pass-through of ETS and CBAM on the price of fertilizer. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be an easy study, but we'll make it as honestly as we can, and that's one thing. The second thing is you were talking of carbon pricing. That's an opportunity to say that also we need to reflect on how to match carbon farming and ETS and find a way. And that there it's again a complicated discussion, but we'll not shy we'll not shy away from it, even if it's long. There might be real benefits and synergies to. We're talking of trade-offs. There are also some synergies possible. So let's reflect on that. On the second question, why not directly a single market? Well. An overall the fertilizing product regulation into a full single market. I mean, if you read the Fertiliser Action Plan, that is one of the options we will assess, in particular for inorganic fertilizer, because it's probably easier. There are a lot of difficulties on that, but we will not shy away again from this. This will be assessed, and there is probably a real progress, potentially real progress on the inorganic aspects. And even if it's not a full single market, it can be an improvement of mutual recognition, and there is probably a lot that can be generated from the reflection on this assessment. So it's always more prudent not to come immediately with the solution when you're not completely sure. It's so easy to do. There is a reason why in 2019 the fertilizing product regulation reached this level. There are health and environmental issues and sensitivities in member states that doesn't make it so easy always, but we are determined to progress on this.
Well, I think that's a good note to end it on. I like this idea that today is the start of a working group and a dialogue between the sector and the Commission policymakers as we look ahead to what comes next. I think we've heard a lot of different possibilities here that are outlined by the action plan, some of them short-term, some of them long-term. I think we definitely have a sense that there's a lot of short-term anxiety, and so short-term measures are going to be crucial, but also keeping that long-term focus in mind, particularly with decarbonizing fertilizers. So I want to thank the panelists so much for a great discussion. How about a round of applause for them? And there's like 20 more questions that I didn't get to on Slido, but the good news is I think Fabian's able to stick around for the coffee break. No,
for the coffee break.
For the coffee break, yes. So you're invited to continue the discussion during the coffee break now. We will come back in the room at 11 o'clock for the next panel, which will be on ETS and CBAM. See you back here at 11. Hello, welcome back to everyone joining us online and those of you here in the room. I hope you enjoyed the coffee break. We're now going to move on to panel 2, which is on ETS, CBAM, and the fertilizer industry designing a fair transition. ETS and CBAM already came up a fair bit in panel 1. As you can see, this is a hot topic. And it's a hot topic for the fertilizer sector because as an energy-intensive area, fertilizer production sits at the center of the EU's carbon pricing framework. So this panel is going to analyze the economic realities of reducing emissions in terms of fertilizer production. At the moment, technological options such as electrification remain uncompetitive in terms of pricing. And the fertilizer sector has long investment cycles that are often spanning decades. So this transformation for fertilizers is fairly complex. So we're going to ask how the revised ETS can support industrial competitiveness while preserving the integrity and the stability of the carbon market. Let me introduce to you now the panelists we have here with us today. We have Paweł Roski, Deputy Director of the Department for Air Protection and Climate Negotiations for Poland. We have Adam Jarubas, Polish MEP and from the EPP and member of the ITRE and ENVI committees. We have Andrzej Marsu, who is founder and executive director of the European Roundtable on Climate Change and Sustainable Transition, ERCST. And we have Antoine Hoxe, Director General for Fertilizers Europe. Thank you all so much for joining us here today. A reminder, you can ask your questions by putting them in on Slido, and I'll also check and see if we have any live questions from the audience. Paweł, let me start with a question for you. Looking particularly at the Polish perspective, how can CBAM address the growing competitiveness challenges that are facing the fertilizer sector, which, as we heard already from the first panel, is being heavily impacted by the ETS?
Okay, thank you very much. And first of all, let me thank you for invitation. Indeed, it's a very hot topic, CBAM and ETS. So I'm very glad that we have opportunity to discuss these two issues in the context of the fertilizer sector. And answering your question, CBAM, one of the main reasons it was created for is to, among others, to preserve competitiveness of the European industry, including chemicals, fertilizers, and so on. The other reason was also first one, I think, was to lower the emission outside the EU. So we've got combination of two reasons that not excluding each other, but even should reinforce each other. So yes, and the CBAM could and should help maintain competitiveness of the fertilizers industry in Europe. It's very important because we are talking about the product that it's used in the agriculture, is connected with the food security, and so on. So it's quite special, and it should be treated as such. And CBAM, by imposing a cost for imported goods, should help them to survive against the competition from outside the EU, but not CBAM alone, because it should be combined with the free allocation, which should be maintained, and also with the possibility to receive indirect cost compensation, because it's also very important in the times when the energy prices are very high. And also influencing the industry. So CBAM, I believe, has potential to help the industry, but like I said, it should be combined with the free allocation and the indirect cost compensations. So that's why we think that we need to adjust the current legislation and maintain free allocation until CBAM proves that it's working, it helps the industry, it prevents carbon leakage, and so on. So what we would like to see in the upcoming revision of the ETS, because those two files are connected, we would like to postpone removing of the free allocation, wait, check whether CBAM is working, because now we don't have any proofs, we don't have any data that shows that CBAM is working well. Why? Because it's a completely new instrument. So we've just started in January with a lot of changes still ongoing. We are talking about for example, Article 27A, which is also important. So it's not over. Changes are. We are working on some changes to the current legislation, which doesn't help checking whether CBAM will be effective. So yeah, the main message is that CBAM has potential, but we need to keep the free allocation, and also keep the possibility to use indirect cost compensations for the industries, all the industries that CBAM covers, but fertilizer sector should be treated in a special way.
And as you say, the ETS revision and CBAM are very connected, because CBAM was designed to replace those free allocations. And now the issue is CBAM ready actually to replace those free allocations? So thanks for that perspective, that national government perspective from the Council. Let's move to the Parliament. Adam Euribus, taking a step back, what is CBAM's core objective? What is it supposed to serve? And how might it impact the fertilizer sector?
Thank you so much for the invitation. This is a great pleasure. I come from Poland as well, but I present European Parliament perspective. I work in ITRE and ENVI committee. Both are engaged in ETS and CBAM regulation as well. We have on the table CBAM regulation now. But we are expecting the European Commission will present soon ETS review, so it is really connected. CBAM was designed to protect European industry from carbon leakage and ensure that our companies are not disadvantaged by ambitious climate rules compared to producers in countries with lower environmental standards. It is core purpose, and it must be upheld. At the same time, we need to protect both the European fertilizers industry and the farmers, what was said earlier. We must ensure a level playing field for European fertilizers producers, but we cannot allow the competitiveness of our agriculture, European agriculture, to suffer. We must lower the price of all fertilizers, not just imported ones. European farmers need affordable and reliable nutrition, whether produced in Europe or imported. In my opinion, Article 27 creates unnecessary legal uncertainty for European industry. This is not only about fertilizer. There is a strong opposition from a wide representative of sectors that fear potential political intervention in their markets. That is why I believe Article 27 will be deleted in ENVI committee. That is, from my point of view, the right direction. However, deletion is not enough. We propose a clear solution. Revenues generated from CBAM imports that cause turbulence on the European market should be redirected to the affected sectors. In the case of fertilizers, these revenues should support European agriculture and help financing the action plan proposed by the European Commission. Let us turn CBAM into a tool that truly strengthens Europe's industrial competitiveness, food security, and strategic autonomy. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Andrei, let's turn to you next. So obviously the The purpose of the ETS is to decarbonize various energy-intensive sectors in Europe. What is the best way for the fertilizer sector to decarbonize? Is the ETS helping to drive that change right now? And how will CBAM impact the sector?
Well, again, also thank you very much for inviting me here today. And I think it's a topic that we all love to hate. I mean, everybody kind of swears that they want to talk about ETS, but they continue to talk about it for the last 20 years. Now, look, I want to talk to something fairly specific here. And the reason for that is that together with Shared Economy Climat from Dauphine University, we did a study on the interrelation between CBAM and ETS. And we had 2 case studies as part of that study. One of them was on the steel industry, the other one was the fertilizer industry. So no wonder I ended up on this panel. So in looking at and what you said initially is that this was designed or conceived as CBAM was conceived as replacing CBAM, free allocation. That was the initial conception. But I think further analysis will tell you that the relationship is a lot more complex than that. And if you look at CBAM, the CBAM primarily affects relative prices and trading condition by narrowing the marginal gap between EU production subject to carbon pricing and imports, where free allocation really is about profitability and balance sheet. So it is somewhat the same, but not the same. It's similar, but not the same. So when we looked at the fertilizer industry, what we looked at the upstream, which was the ammonium nitrate fertilizer production. The downstream we consider to be the agricultural production of stable grain production. So the nitrate, ammonium nitrate was the upstream, and the downstream, if you want, which was feeding into the production of the upstream, was the grain production. And the conclusions were quite interesting. And the conclusion that we reached for the fertilizer industry, now mind you, please remember, this is modeling. It's a general equilibrium model, but it's still modeling. What CBAM can achieve on its own, because we run two models. One of them was with the normal decrease that we have now in the free allocation and increase in CBAM, and the other one maintaining both of them. And what we found out that what CBAM will do, it will support EU production in the covered sectors. It will reduce dependence on imports and encourages cleaner production both inside and outside the EU. Now, there are some difficulties that emerge there, and one of them is rising carbon costs erode the profitability of carbon-efficient EU firms upstream. So the fact that the financial gain from the phase-out of free allocation eventually offsets any early gains from from the carbon-efficient EU firms. In contrast, when free allocation is maintained, carbon-efficient firms thrive through long-term as they gain market share from closing inefficient plants. So this is quite startling. Now, if you combine the two, what you have, it makes the adjustment less severe for the upstream sector. It contains the negative impact on the downstreams, but does not reverse it. It contains it, but does not reverse it. It reduces the inflationary effect on the upstream sector, and it leads to a comparable or greater reduction in the EU average carbon intensity. So there are quite different things that these two mechanisms do. They seem the same, but they don't act, and they don't act on the same level of the value chain. The free allocation will work much more on one side, and the CBAM has a bigger impact on another side of the value chain. So this is one thing that I would say. The other thing that have been mentioned also by the previous speakers, you've got a number of other really hard chestnuts. One of them is Article 27A, which is hard, and we think that, I understand the uncertainty, political uncertainty, we understand that, but there's another element, that other element that introducing the ETS discussion besides an environmental dimension, an economic dimension in the decision-making process. And that would have, if we ever get in the WTO appellate panel, that is going to hurt. Because we claim that this is an environmental process. If you start introducing economic decision points, then that creates problem. The other thing that hasn't been mentioned, and again, I think these guys are better suited than me to speak to the fertilizer industry is somewhat seasonal. Exports play an important role. And CBAM doesn't have an export solution yet. The solution that has been provided so far in the CBAM package that was put together in November is a temporary, is not a very effective and efficient one. Maybe they'll provide something better in July. I'll stop here.
Thanks a lot. Antoine, let's turn to you next. So obviously the idea of the ETS is to drive companies to make the investments in technological change that decarbonizes. What's the best way for the fertilizers sector to decarbonize? What are the economic realities of reducing emissions in the fertilizer production? And are technical options such as electrification available right now?
Well, that's a good question, and it's something that actually our thinking and our understanding has evolved. If you were to ask us 5 years ago, the answer would have been different from what we know now. Actually, we did a roadmap practically 5 years ago, and the main mindset at that time was towards electrification. That was seen at that time as the main avenue for reducing emissions. And when I'm talking about emissions, it's emissions when you produce ammonia. Now, we have studied it as an industry. There were pilot plants built in several places in Europe, and from a technical point of view, it's doable. It's very doable. We can decarbonize by electrifying. The problem is cost. And when you know that our customers are farmers and their capability to accept higher costs is practically zero or very low, even for premium products, then puts a question mark. So now we're more towards, we have to also look at other avenues to decarbonize. One thing is sure, as an industry, we have understood the direction we want to decarbonize. That is the future, no question about that. The question, how do we do it? And in that sense, we need really technology neutrality. All options should be kept on the table. Not only green, it's blue ammonia, that means with carbon capture and storage. Pink biogas, as it was mentioned, everything should be working together to reduce the costs, because it's not a technical problem, it's an economic problem.
Pavel, I wanted to come back to this issue of Article 27A, because it was mentioned both by Adam and Andre. So Adam says he thinks that 27A will be deleted by the Parliament. What's your prediction for the Council? What's Poland's position on it, and what do you expect to happen in the Council?
Okay, so we've already almost finished our work in Council, so we are preparing for the trilogues. So from the beginning, we as Poland weren't big fans of the Article 27A, because like Adam said, it creates unpredictability for the market. It gives power to Commission to exclude some sectors. So if you exclude one, another one will come and say that they also need to be excluded, and so on. So it can bring a lot of problems. But on the other hand, like I said before, we are talking about some sectors that are quite specific, like fertilizers. So in the Council, as the compromise, we decided to live with Article 27A. But our condition was that if you apply Article 27A for given sector, this sector have to receive free allocation and have the possibility to use indirect cost compensations. Because just to bring back the normal situation when the sector is not included in the CBAM. So I think that it's the fair compromise in the Council, and I think that with this exactly position we will go to the trilogue. So, and I can't predict what will happen in the trilogues. So,
Antoine, what's your position on Article 27A? How do you feel about this Council compromise?
Wow. Article 27A was a shock for our industry, literally, because those who had invested saw their investment in decarbonization, so their business plans fall apart. And all those who had plans to invest, of course, it froze immediately. Who is the CEO that will dare to go to a bank and say, give me a loan, I want to be part of this revolution to decarbonize, and we'll get it? Not with this Article 27A. So for us, it's an absolute no-go. It's not a question of compromise. Keeping Article 27A is leaving a Damocles sword on the heads of all our CEOs who want to decarbonize. This is the reality from our perspective.
Andre, what's your position?
Look, it's one-off too many times. You know, Maggie Thatcher used to say, this is getting wobbly. And this is getting wobbly. I mean, you got an exemption for Repower EU, it's one-off. You got an exemption for this with a one-off. There's too many one-offs. And then, you know, I'm not talking about rule of law, it's a big word. But, you know, there's no consistency, there's no predictability. You know, certainty doesn't exist in life, but there's no predictability. So if that is the case, if you make a decision to keep it, I think you better tighten it very, 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 very sharply in terms of under what conditions and reporting, and the whole thing has to be tightened really, really, really hard. You know, impossible to write rules for every circumstance. Our first reaction was, you know, I mean, who's next? That's the first. And I have no power plants and I have no fertilizer plants. I have 15 computers. So, but for somebody that looks at policy and policy formation, that's an obvious question. And again, the WTO part and the impression that it makes on, I tell you what, this morning I drove from Bonn from UNFCCC negotiation. I'm going to drive back in the afternoon. And one of the hot topics in Bonn is trade. And one of the hot topics in trade is CBAM. I can tell you what, you know, from South Africans to Brazilians to everybody else. So how am I going to stand up and explain this to these people that we're not making decisions on environmental consideration, but on economic considerations?
Adam, Antoine, you wanted to
no,
come in?
please go, and I want to come back.
Okay,
one thing.
Adam, I wanted to ask you about this idea of using CBAM revenues to support European agriculture. How could this be done? How could it align with the Fertiliser Action Plan?
I think we calculate that if we win this proposal, because I'm going to force it during our negotiation within Parliament position, but we calculate that it could give us even 150 million additional money from the revenues redirected to to this sector covered for financing the schemes for our farmers, but also for strengthening the competitiveness of the sector. So I hope during the trilogues we will convince our partners from the Council and we will persuade this proposal. So I'm convinced that it is visible.
Pavel, what has the feeling been in Council about this idea of using CBAM revenues to support agriculture?
You know, it wasn't discussed a lot because, like I said, the compromise was to keep the 27A with some conditions. But I think that it's the idea that it's worth discussing within the trilogue. It's quite interesting. I have some doubts how to implement it, but of course I believe it can be done. And if it can be used to support both the industry and agriculture, I think it's really worth discussing.
Antoine, wanted to come back to you in terms of the ETS review. Obviously, the purpose of CBAM is to prevent carbon leakage, but it's also very much looking at the competitiveness of European industries and European companies. In your view, how can that review be conducted in a way that preserves the goals of the ETS while also not hurting the competitiveness of European companies, in your case, fertilizer companies?
Okay, but allow me to go back. I wanted to intervene just 1 second on Article 27A because it's very close to my heart. Actually, it was often presented as an emergency brake, saying, well, if the car is going too fast, we need to have an emergency brake. Actually, it's not an emergency brake. It's a catapult. It throws you totally out of the system. And what we need actually is, if the car is going too fast, we need first to slow down. We have to slow down, and this links to your question, actually, how this links to competitiveness and the ETS review. We have the opportunity to slow down things with the ETS review. And what I mean by slow down is the pace of free allocation decrease, because it's the free allocation that will drive the increase of prices, and it's the direct cost to the farmer. So this is the solution. And I'm 100% with what Adam is proposing here. Take the revenues of CBAM, give it to farmers. That is, in our view, an excellent solution.
I want to go to some questions that have come in from Slido. Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead.
And he's going to regret this, but I have to say it. I mean, one of the things that Europe is doing right now, and I apologize because you're a member of parliament, but when in doubt, throw money at it. When in doubt, you throw money at it. You know, throw money to the farmers, throw money to industry, throw money to everybody. It doesn't work. This is a Band-Aid, and you're going to look at the structural and deep problem of what you're dealing with. And the structural and deep problem that right now, this is not sustainable. Why? Because I come from a place 200 kilometers from here that nobody's doing what we do. And at some point, you can push the ball down the field and you can pay money as long as we still have money. But you're going to hit a wall. We're not going to hit a wall now. You're going to hit a wall in 2031, 32, 33. And all this commission is not going to be here. Member Parliament will be different, so everybody is fine. But when you come to the next cycle, I can predict with almost certainty that there's not going to be money to pay anybody down. So what are you going to do? Either you consider what is in the ETS directive, that you have to look at what other people are doing. That's what it says. The ETS directive says that. Have we really done that? The answer is no.
Okay, Pavel, I'm going to put this question to you. It's from Cayeto Hernandez Fertigui. How can the ETS and CBAM together ensure that first movers investing in low carbon ammonia and fertilizer production are not placed at a disadvantage compared to existing European producers operating with depreciated fossil-based assets? So the key question of ETS, how do we make sure that it's still motivating first movers?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. I think that we are not talking about changing direction completely. So I think that the motivation will still be there, because we are still talking about keeping ETS with some adjustment. We also think that we should maintain free allocation and slow down the whole system, let's say, because we are also looking for the reduction of the linear reduction factor and so on. But it doesn't mean that we will stop the ETS completely. So there still be an obligation to buy allowances, to surrender emissions, and so on. There are some tools that are still rewarding the best performers. So we have conditionality for the worst performers, reduction of free allocation for them, and so on. We can add some mechanism that will, for example, give up more free allocation for the best performers and for the installation that will invest in clean technologies. So I think that incentives will still be there in the ETS, and the adjustment that we are talking about and will be discussing in the upcoming ETS revision will not change the direction, but will just adjust the system to work better, to decarbonize even faster, I think, but more efficient. So there will be no situation where the best efforts will be punished. So I believe that there is a possibility to adjust the system in such way that, like I said, will incentivize the best performers and also speed up the decarbonization.
Okay, next Slido question I'll put to Antoine, and if you want to come in on this as well. The question is from Aviv Bartal. It's about who pays the cost, something that came up in the first panel. Why not put the CBAM and carbon cost coming with it at the end of the value chain, as close as practical to the consumers? It's a very small extra cost for consumers and will finance the decarbonization of the entire value chain. So Antoine, what do you think of that idea?
Well, actually, it was one of the elements I was thinking to bring. Actually, we need, of course, to give incentive to the first movers. And we have in our membership leaders who have invested, taken the risk, and they need to be motivated even further. But there are two directions for this. First is within ETS. We have to very clearly understand the difference between the price signal and the carbon cost. We need to have a high carbon price to motivate those who abate and have the free allocation, so they are well rewarded. But we have at the same time to keep the carbon cost low for the whole industry, so that industry continues to produce fertilizers at an affordable price for farmers. And the solution within the ETS, so this part of the solution, is keeping free allocations. The other part is exactly what was mentioned in the question. We need to create, for the longer term, markets. because there are incentives, there should be also support to industry, but in the long term we need the market. You cannot subsidize the whole industry for ever. It's not a business plan. We need to create a business plan and create a demand, and the demand has to come from the end consumer. That means you and me that eat 3 times a day, at least me. It is the consumer of the food that has to contribute, and it's a tiny part actually, and we need to, it's not an easy thing to do, but we need to work into that direction, and that's why the dialogue we want to start with Commission and farmers and all stakeholders is very important.
I think this is very interesting that you brought it up. I'm not quite sure what you had in mind exactly and where Antoine is going with this. But this is something that preoccupies some people here. It's a little bit of avant-garde thinking, if you want. It comes from the fact that in the end you need the market for low carbon products. I mean, you know, what we've done, we incentivized a bunch of people to produce low carbon products, but there's nobody buying them because there's no market for that. But to create a market for low carbon product, the reality is in the end you have to change the accounting system. You have to have product accounting, and that is a very, very different approach than the current accounting that we have for carbon. So in the end, you know, it's going to be kind of a ledger accounting where the carbon goes down the value chain, and it hits the consumer. Now, then the consumer will make a choice to pay for this product and demand the lower price. But yes, indeed, then the carbon cost is being borne by people down the value chain as opposed to up the chain. And there were some, first of all, this is an ingrained system. The WRI, WBCSD protocol has been around for 30 years. Second thing is it changes philosophically the way you approach addressing climate change, and that is revolutionary.
Let me check if we have any live questions in the room. Yes, we have one in the middle here. Microphone is coming behind you.
Thank you. Hi there, Thomas Lividini from Edelman. This is probably a question from the perspective of a third country producer, especially of low carbon fertilizers. So the first report of CBAM is due on the 30th of September 2027. But by then, there's a problem because verifiers cannot verify the actual data. So it's possible that imports will have to use default values. So I wanted to ask the Parliament and the Council of Representatives whether this is an issue that is being looked at in the current legislative process, and how to reconcile this with the objectives of CBAM. Thank you.
Yeah, Adam, maybe we'll put it to you first. We have a kind of lack of data at this point, right?
Yeah, it's challenging, but my perspective is we should promote production in Europe. I'm chairing of SANT committee. We recently reached an agreement when it comes to Critical Medicines Act, and we are working on a bi-European approach. So from my point of view, representing Poland, we should do our best to strengthening, first of all, production in Europe. But of course, we are dependent on supply chains from outside Europe. We should work on it. I don't have yet a clear position how to combine this relation with third countries.
Adam, sorry, Pavel, same question for you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. It was a quite long discussion about the default values last November and December, if I remember correctly. And indeed, it's an issue, because for CBAM to work efficient, we need a network of verifiers, and those verifiers need to have access to the current high quality data. So it's something that is still missing in the system. It's a huge problem, and it's being discussed at the various opportunities. We are also discussing the circumventions rules, how to avoid any kind of avoiding the rules of CBAM and so on. And these topics of verifiers and high quality data are also discussed while discussing the other issues. So yes, it's being discussed in the council, and I hope that we will solve the problem soon.
Okay, we have another question here from the audience.
Yes, very fast. Max Schulman, farmer from Finland. Just a quick question. I mean, I can see that none of you are really happy in what's on the table and what's put in place. I mean, you know, we are not maybe either. But what would you, all of you, would like to hear from you? Where do you see that you would like to see the change so that would actually CBAM ETS together would work as it was intended? Where would you like to see the changes? How would you change it? There is still some time.
Anyone eager to take that?
You mean if I have godlike powers, then I can do anything I want? It would be great. Make sure what you're asking for. I'll tell you what. First thing is the question. The previous question referred to data, and the French would call it the usine à gaz. We've created another incredible machine. We had the ETS machine, now we have the CBAM machine. But there is an article in the CBAM directive, 212 or 12.2, I can't remember, one that refers to bilateral agreements with countries. And instead of having all these people running around accrediting people and verifying and doing this, that, and the other thing, I think probably the simplest thing and the most effective thing is to reach bilateral agreement to different countries. And you have a ton of carbon coming from Canada, you know what it is, and that is very possible, it's much simpler. But answering your question, it depends. It depends our esteemed members of parliament, the council, what exactly they want. Do they want to fix this thing for the next cycle, for the short cycle? In which case, there are certain things you're going to do. You're going to fix the MSR threshold and intakes and things of that sort. And the machine will continue to work for the next 3-4 years without any problem. Or you actually want to do some serious surgery and fix it for investment in decarbonization. That implies a lot more changes, and conditionality comes into this in a very important way. There is this conditionality associated with giving free allocation. Philosophically, I have some problem with that, but let's say it's there. But there's a second conditionality, and the second conditionality ask me to, and I'm taking a chemical example. You're taking a cracker that you want to decarbonize, you want to decarbonize, you electrify that. And in order to decarbonize that, I need also access to a line of high power line, and I need access to renewable energy, I need access to hydrogen, I need access to CO2 storage. And so there's the conditionality around the ETS, because the ETS puts a price on carbon. But in order to act on that price of carbon, you need a lot of other things to be in place. And the question, are those things in place? So my view would be that you would have to think of putting conditionality in ETS on both ways. On one way, I'm going to give you a free allocation if you do certain things. You're a nice boy and girl and do something nice. But there's also a conditionality that you're asking me to do something, but you have to give me the conditions to be able to act on that price. Because if the price is 500 and I don't have a power line, my only option is to close.
Okay, well, let's take one last Slido question before we wrap up. Pavel, I'll put this question to you. It's from Frank Hubermeister. With ETS costs increasing, inflating EU producers' costs and prices, and CBAM spreading this price increase to imports, farmers will suffer. While other solutions are explored, wouldn't removing fertilizers from ETS be the obvious solution?
Tricky question. Yeah, it's one of the solutions, but I'm afraid that it will bring the avalanche. So we may have another exclusion and another, and the system will just end. So I think that we need to keep the incentives to decarbonize. like I said before, but we should keep the direction, but even industry is not against it. So what we should do is to adjust the system, to implement some new mechanism, to adjust the existing ones, to be more pragmatic, more flexible, to make the system more pragmatic, more flexible, and more adjusted to the current needs. Because we must remember that we were designing the system in the completely different reality. Now we've got different situation geopolitically. We've got Trump, we've got Russia aggression in Ukraine, we've got Iran, and so on. So a lot has changed, and we are in the different reality. So I think it's not the best idea to exclude some industries from the system, but of course we can discuss it. But to adjust the system, to make it more effective and adjusted to the current reality. So that's the way I think.
Well, definitely a lot of food for thought on this. As we can tell, this is a moving area because it's a live piece of legislation that's working its way through the legislative process right now, but it's also an evolving geopolitical situation, geoeconomic situation, and that is bringing a lot of changes for the agriculture sector in general, but particularly for fertilizers, particularly affected by what's happening now in the Gulf. I want to thank our panelists for some really interesting thoughts. How about a round of applause for them? And now I would like to invite Antoine to take to the podium to give us some concluding thoughts for the morning.
Well, first, I want to thank you all for being here, and I need like 30 seconds to switch my head and my mindset from panelist to, well, part of the host here. First, well, why am I here? I'm here actually simply because I tried to volunteer my director of communications to do the closure, and his answer was, well, you are the boss, you have to work more. So, but I want to say it was a pleasure and a honor for us to have Commissioner Hansen with us today, and I was very pleased to hear that according to the Commission, because from us it has always been, fertilizer sector is a strategic sector. This recognition, for me, it's a change of mindset here in Brussels. And we have huge challenges in front of us. How to have reliable, affordable, EU-made and climate-friendly fertilizers, and even actually Fabien Santini, he was pushing it a little further. He wants a win-win-win. Win. So it's 4 times. It is a real challenge. How are we going to tackle this? There is no easy solution. And the way forward is certainly this value chain partnership, talking to each other. And indeed, this same event was made in the spirit of partnership. So we don't need to wait for Q3 to have the official part. We need to continue discussing, because actually we've never stopped talking to our friends, and I'm at Max Schulman here. We've been talking, but we need to do it even more now to make sure that we look straight in the eyes of what's coming. And I like also what Ellie said, we should not shy away from big questions. We have to tackle these big questions, because talking about small fixes and patches. No, we have to see what are the big questions. And she mentioned one, energy, ETS, CBAM, climate policies. We had actually invited DG Klima, and it would have been great to have them also participate to this discussion. Unfortunately, they couldn't make it, but we will make sure that they also are involved, because for me, part of the solution comes from that direction. I think everyone agrees that farmers need support in these difficult times. Where we have multiple crises and many things moving. And I like very much the proposal made by Adam Yarubas here. Say, take the CBAM money, give it to the farmers, but also, we should not forget, also industry needs support. So we have to keep this in mind also, because as Commissioner said, Europe needs a strong industry. That's a given. I've heard about a level playing field. It's important for us. We've had also, and my notes are messier in the second panel because I was there. We've heard about CBAM and ETS, they are mirrors. Also, Ellie mentioned that. So we have to look at them together. We cannot separate. And we've heard some ideas here also coming from Poland. The idea of keep maintaining free allocation, it's something that as an industry we're very much in favor because it would solve. And what Andrei said with a lot of complicated words for me, this fact that free allocation and CBAM actually it's not either or, but they are complementary. We have to think, and it's a new thinking, a new economic evidence and modeling that shows that you should actually combine the two of them. This is something new to me, and it's important. And then when I look, and I sort of like the last question, but I didn't have a chance to answer, is if you have a magic wand, what do you do? And thank you, Max, for asking that. It's a very difficult one. I would certainly agree with what Andrei said. It's a good summary. But to be very practical, if I had this magic wand, what I would do, it's not remove ETS. We need ETS, and we should not forget this industry is the best success story in ETS. We are the only industry, except power, that has cut its emission by 50%. No one has done this. So, and I would, again, I wanted to have DG Klima here because we are our best example for them that ETS is working, and we want ETS to work. But we have to have a workable ETS. So with my magic wand, I will do one thing. I will keep free allocation. Keep free allocation till 2034. Don't start going, because farmers will feel it. We need. And as I have a magic wand, of course, I can do a second thing. So I will do it. Remove that ridiculous 42% RFMBO target in red. It is something that it's not going to happen. Can you imagine? We have a target of 42% for 2030, and we are at 0.25%. Does it make any sense to continue? We have to face reality. We have to have the courage to see things as they are. So, well, now I leave my magic wand. I'm coming back on Earth. I think we've had very interesting discussions, and I want to thank all the speakers and again the Commissioner for his time, and all of you for being here. I think we're finishing this event, but this is the start of the next step where we need really to work together, to work with DG Agri and all member states, because it's not just us in Brussels solving everything, it's member states, it's you also in your constituencies when it comes to MEPs and capitals. We need to change things. Again, thank you for being here, and let's again thank our speakers and our great moderator.
Thanks very much, Antoine, and thank you to all of you for joining us for this morning's discussions. If you're here in the room, I now invite you to the networking lunch just on the other side of these doors. If you've joined us online, thank you so much for spending your morning with us, and I wish you a great afternoon. Take care.